So it's the Pmqs for the 25th of January 2023. Welcome back. Let's chat. Third Pmqs of the year. Keir Starmer starts off talking about the Zara Alina murder case and asks, does the PM accept the findings of the inspector report by the probation office? The PM replies by saying immediate steps are being taken to address the findings in the report and admits to severe failings in the way the risk assessment of offenders is conducted. Keir Starmer returns saying he's glad the PM accepts the findings of the report. The report also says staff vacancies and excessive workload play a factor in why the killer was ever on the street in the first place. These issues are systemic and ultimately for ministers to deal with. Does the PM accept these findings also? The Prime Minister comes back saying that they're outlining the steps being taken to improve, then claims the steps are taking effect as less electronic monitoring sentences are given by the courts, so less people are on tag. But if the things he stated before are working, Zara would be practicing law instead of being the victim of a deadly killer. Keir Starmer states Dagenham, Barking and Havering councils let Zara Alina down, and that across the country, public services are failing because of a decade of underfunding, a botched then reverse privatisation attempt, and that this is just another service on its knees after 13 years of Tories. Keir continues that Zara Alina's family say the government has blood on its hands. Does the PM accept that? The Prime Minister shows some compassion for Zara Alina's family at this point and claims that £155 million is going into the probation service to improve. He makes a claim that the Police Crime and Sentencing Act that was passed to stop people from protesting more than anything would help stop more cases like Zara Alina's from happening, and Keir Starmer voted against it. At this point, an MP can be heard saying, it's already law and look what's happened. What I take from that is despite the law being in place, serious crime still happened. So what good is it? Like I said, the Police Crime and Sentencing Act is more about protesting and stopping/banning protests and protecting statues as it came about in response to the Black Lives Matter protests and all the civil unrest that took place during the COVID years. So it's more about that than it is about protecting women and girls. This was a cheap shot by Rishi that doesn't do much, especially considering what the question was. To end on that was a bit shit. Keir Starmer returns, saying the Prime Minister should be boasting about the protection he has put in place when this has happened, even with the so-called protections in place. Keir Starmer was, before becoming an MP and Labour leader, basically the top lawyer in the country as a director of public prosecutions, and says he won't take lectures about protecting women from him. Keir Starmer then asks, does the PM agree that tax-dodging MPs are not fit to be in charge of taxpayers' money? The Prime Minister claims he is happy to make his position known, which is met with laughter as the PM has had to deal with tax-dodging allegations with regard to his wife only about 2 or 3 months ago, as she had non-dom status and wasn't paying tax in the UK for the money she earned for having shares in her father's tech company, which operates in India and Russia. Basically, by having non-dom status, she was saying the UK isn't her permanent home, and that's why she should pay her taxes elsewhere, even though her husband is Prime Minister and her children are in school in the UK, but she doesn't live here. That's what she's saying. Keir Starmer's question, though broad, was about Nadeem Zahawi, who is under pressure currently to reveal why he made a payment to HMRC for over £3 million. Rishi claims the issue with Zahawi wasn't raised when he became Prime Minister, which is more than likely a lie, because when Zahawi was made Chancellor by Boris Johnson, the appointment was advised against by the government officials. Because of the tax issues, he would be under investigation for a few days after being made Chancellor. Rishi continues that all the regular appointment procedures were followed, but more information has come to light since last week, and it's important to establish the facts. That's why he has asked an independent advisor, to investigate what's going on to establish the facts, and since then, Zahawi has been sacked. Keir Starmer returns. The PM avoided the question. It's obvious that tax dodgers can't be in charge of tax, but the Prime Minister can't even acknowledge the question. Last week, the Prime Minister said one thing about the matter. This week, after increasing public pressure, all of a sudden there's questions to be answered. What changed? The Prime Minister appeals to the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that Keir Starmer should listen. Since he commented on the matter last week, more information and a statement from Zahawi has come out. Of course, the politically expedient thing to do would be to have it sorted before Pmqs even started, but he believes in due process, and that's why he's made sure an investigation is conducted. But if that's what you thought, why didn't you get the issue sorted last week? Plus, when you became PM, and gave your speech outside number 10, you were chatting bare about integrity and honesty in your government and cabinet, then reappointed Suella Braverman, who was only just recently fired for being a threat to national security at that time. So if what you say is true from last week, this investigation would have started. Not this week, when it's all over. The news and people are saying, yo, R.Wagwan for your dog. Rishi claims opposition can't have it both ways. The opposition MPs urged him to appoint an ethics advisor, the person who is conducting the investigation and is meant to investigate any dastardly deeds taking place amongst cabinet members, and now says that they are opposed to them doing that job. He ends by saying it's political opportunism, which is comedic to me, given how he mentioned the law earlier in relation to the murder of Zara Alina that had nothing to do with the protection of women and girls and did nothing to stop the murder taking place, as the law came into effect before the murder. So it's very much the pot calling the kettle black when it comes to political opportunism. Keir Starmer returns to the dispatch box, saying we all know why the PM was reluctant to ask about tax avoidance and family finances, which is met by laughter. The PM's failure to sack Zahawi demonstrates how weak he is. He oversees chaos and is constantly overwhelmed. Can't say when ambulance times will come down, can't say when the prison system will keep the public at large safe, can't deal with tax avoidance in his own cabinet. Is the job too big for him? Scathing. The Prime Minister appeals to the Speaker that he stands by his principles and values. The Prime Minister appeals to the Speaker that he stands by his principles and values even when it's hard. When he disagreed with Boris, he resigned from the government, which was again political opportunism because he wasn't a first mover on this. He didn't resign until after Sajid Javid did, and that only happened because it was clear that all the scandals surrounding Boris at the time were too much for the public. He should have resigned when the Dominic Cummings scandal happened if he had so much integrity, at the very least when the first reports of Partygate emerged, but he was also at the party, so that's why he didn't do that. By him as the Chancellor stepping down from the government, it put him in a better position to ultimately become the Prime Minister today. So I don't get why he's acting brand new as Prime Minister when he's been trashed. Don't let Eat Out to help out fool you. That was a killer too. Like, more people were at risk of COVID because of Eat Out to help out. Plus, at that time as Chancellor, he was basically the second most senior person in the government. So to wait for the Health Minister to make a move before following in his trail, to me shows his true nature. He wants to do big things, but he's overly cautious at best or just scared at worst. Rishi then gets out the in case of emergency break glass Jeremy Corbyn line, saying that for 4 years Keir was part of his shadow cabinet when there was bare madness going on in the party, mainly the anti-Semitism. He then claims it is in fact Keir who is weak, having no principles and petty politics. Okay, so first of all, Jeremy Corbyn isn't even an MP anymore, so that's that. You can tell when Rishi is on the ropes because the Corbyn bar gets dropped like it's going to do anything for anyone. He gets a roar from the MPs behind him, but it's not even an attack, it's like the low kick of political moves, cheap and easily brushed aside. Secondly, he said Keir has no principles, but the principles Rishi said he would abide by, he hasn't done so. It's coming like he's just projecting. And that's the end of responses to Keir's questions. Then, it was the leader of the Scottish National Party, Stephen Flynn's turn. He asked about how people could improve their finances by rolling the scandal surrounding Boris Johnson getting an 800k loan, then making the person who gave it to him the head of the BBC, Rishi's wife and other Tory MPs having non-dom status, and Nadine Zahawi having a trust in Gibraltar all into one question. Sunak just made a list of things the government are doing to help people who are struggling financially. That was his response, which didn't even lightly brush over any content in the question he was asked. Flynn returned, saying he doesn't know what the answer was for, but it wasn't for the question that he asked, which highlights Keir's point about Rishi's weakness, to my mind. If you can't even answer the question, how can you claim to be the leader of the country? You can't even answer a question. Like, that is a sign of weakness. Flynn continued that all he is doing is protecting Boris and Nadeem, who had to pay a £5 million fine to HMRC on top of the $3 million that he paid in taxes that he owed. And said that people of Scotland view the Tories as a parcel of rogues. The PM replies that he is following due process with regard to Nadeem, but he isn't, or at the very least he is now that the public pressure is on a high, and Nadeem has since been fired since all of this happened last week Wednesday. All in all, Rishi got trounced again on Wednesday and couldn't answer questions about Nadeem Zahawi, backtracking on the defence he mounted for him the previous week, trying to make it seem as if the government is protecting people when so-called protections were in place prior to tragedy occurring, multiple sidesteps, and in one case a sheer disregard for the actual question being asked, and of course a return to form in these PMQs since even Boris Johnson was PM about another go on the Jeremy Corbyn line, which is old, tired and ineffective. Keir raised important issues and conveyed the idea that he would be a more compassionate Prime Minister, displaying a tactful grace with his legal training. The first three questions Rishi could hardly say no to, and stopped short of agreeing with Keir on all fronts about the issues surrounding the case of Zara Alina, which is in his wheelhouse as a legal professional. Then the tax questions rained down in quick succession, which is very effective at blindsiding Rishi so much so he had to pull out the old Jeremy Corbyn panic attack as some kind of saving grace. I think this type of bait and switch or game of two halves type of question is effective at showing the man who he is. At showing the man who is in charge of the country is not the man for the job. Great at financial stuff, but that doesn't necessarily make you a great leader. Anyway, that was this week's PMQs. Tune in next time because politically it's peak.